Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Course in Miracles, Lesson 71. Only God's plan for salvation will work. You may not realize that the ego has set up a plan for salvation in opposition to God's. It is this plan in which you believe. Since it is the opposite of God's, you also believe that to accept God's plan in place of the ego's is to be damned. This sounds preposterous, of course, yet after we have considered just what the ego's plan is, perhaps you will realize that, however preposterous it may be, you do believe in it. The ego's plan for salvation centers around holding grievances. It maintains that if someone else spoke or acted differently, if some external circumstance or event were changed, you would be saved. Thus, the source of salvation is constantly perceived as outside yourself. Each grievance you hold is a declaration and an assertion in which you believe that says, if this were different, I would be saved. The change of mind necessary for salvation is thus demanded of everyone and everything except yourself. The role assigned to your own mind in this plan, then, is simply to determine what, other than itself, must change if you are to be saved. According to this plan, any perceived source of salvation is acceptable, provided that it will not work. This ensures that the fruitless search will continue, for the illusion persists that, although this hope has always failed, there's grounds for hope in other places and in other things. Another person will yet serve better. Another situation will yet offer success. Such is the ego's plan for salvation. Surely you can see how it is in strict accord with the ego's basic doctrine. Seek, but do not find. For what could more surely guarantee that you will not find salvation than to channelize all your efforts in searching for it where it is not? God's plan for salvation works simply because, by following his direction, you seek the salvation where it is. But if you are to succeed as God promises you will, you must be willing to seek there only. Otherwise, your purpose is divided, and you will attempt to follow two plans for salvation that are diametrically opposed in all ways. The results can only bring confusion, misery, and a deep sense of failure and despair. How can you escape all this? Very simply. The idea for today is the answer. Only God's plan for salvation will work. There can be no real conflict about this because there is no possible alternative to God's plan that will save you. His is the only plan that is certain in its outcome. His is the only plan that must succeed. Let us practice recognizing this certainty today, and let us rejoice that there is an answer to what seems to be a conflict with no resolution possible. All things are possible to God. Salvation must be yours because of his plan, which cannot fail. Begin the 2 longer practice periods for today by thinking about today's idea and realizing that it contains 2 parts, each making equal contribution to the whole. God's plan for you, for your salvation, will work and other plans will not. Do not allow yourself to become depressed or angry at the second part. It is inherent in the first, and in the first is your full release from all your insane attempts and mad proposals to free yourself. They have led to depression and anger, but God's plan will succeed. It will lead to release and joy. Remembering this, let us devote the remainder of the extended practice periods to asking God to reveal his plan to us. Ask him very specifically, what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say, and to whom? Give him full charge of the rest of the practice period, and let him tell you what needs to be done by you in his plan for your salvation. He will answer in proportion to your willingness to hear his voice. Refuse not to hear. The very fact that you're doing these exercises proves that you have some willingness to listen. This is enough to establish your claim to God's answer. In the shorter practice periods, Tell yourself often that God's plan for salvation, and only His, will work. Be alert to all temptation to hold grievances today and respond to them with this form of today's idea. Holding grievances is the opposite of God's plan for salvation, and only His plan will work. Try to remember today's idea some 6 or 7 times an hour. There could be no better way than to spend half a minute or less than to remember the source of your salvation and to see it where it is. This is one of my favorite lessons. I love the what would you have me do? Where would you have me go? What would you have me say and to whom? I use it frequently as just an ongoing mantra. And when I'm preparing for my day, I often use this. I find it extremely, extremely helpful because it takes that responsibility off of me. And this lesson to me, the image that came to mind as I was reading this is because only God's plan for salvation will work and no other plan will. It's not unlike if I have lost my wallet or my keys or my phone and I am looking through my house for it, and my husband and my family come in and say, "So what are you looking for?" And I tell them, and they said, "Okay, do you remember where you were last?" I said, "Yes, I'm in the park. I was in the park." And so they're asking why I'm looking here, and because I want to look here because this is the place I'd rather be. I'm too tired to go back to the park. I'm too tired to go look anywhere else. That is seek, but do not find. With God's plan for salvation, I would go look in the park because that's where I know it resides, and I would probably find it. But you will find God's salvation if you seek it. It will be given. It's already there waiting for you. You simply need to accept it. Another Carol Howe was someone I was listening to about that, and her analogy was actually if you are looking for the Statue of Liberty and you don't know where it is, and you're unfamiliar with the lay of the country, and someone tells you, well, it's in Montana, and you head towards Montana, and someone says, it's actually in New York. And so you're in Missouri, and you are confused now because there's 2 possibilities. Is it in Montana? Do I keep going that way? Or do I go and look this way where someone is certain it is? And the ego would have you go to Montana. The ego would have you go as far away from what you are looking for as possible. Allow yourself to follow God's plan. It's so much more simple. It's so much easier. Okay, now let's see what Tina Spaulding's channeling brings us. You are blessed beings indeed. I am that one that you know as Jesus. What wonderful words these are to realize that chasing your tail around the planet year after year, decade after decade, no longer appeals to you. It no longer tempts you. Temptation, often in your society's definition, is an evil, dirty, and unholy in some way. What we want you to understand is that you have, in your separation from all that is, in your separation from love, placed your own temptations in the world. Let me kind of repeat that one. You have placed your own temptations in the world. That, dear ones, is why they appeal to you. They are not placed there by the devil. The devil is a physiological fantasy, a mythology figure invented to separate you from the knowledge that you design your own temptations. You design your own temptations, and that is why they seem irresistible. We want you to go into this idea of desire and temptation a little bit in this lesson. It's very important you understand the results of following your desires, your passions, and your interests. All these things are not the same. There are deep-seated passions within your mind that you want to deepen your knowledge about. It could be music, art, cooking. It could be anything. But you know what it is. It's that thing you always love to do and that's always interesting to you. Even if you're not doing it as a job, you think, I would love to be able to work at that full time. Then there are other things in more superficial part of your ego consciousness the part of your mind that is separated from guidance and in opposition to God's plan. That may be your love of chocolate cake, your love of promiscuous sex or drugs. These things are not the same. Often you hear that, well, you cannot follow your desires, otherwise, you would just be all over the map. There is a difference between a deep seated interest and passion about a subject and that superficial pleasure seeking activity of the ego. We want to differentiate between these two things because if you believe that you do what you feel drawn to do is evil, then you will not live a happy life. You will not be able to pursue that purpose you came here to fulfill. You will see it as a temptation of the devil, as evil in some way. So when you have a feeling to do something, stop for a moment and ask, is this contributing to the overall health of my life? Is this something that has always been with me and always brought a smile to my face? Or is this some distraction? Is this some temporary band-aid on a negative feeling I'm having, so to go and drink a beer or buy a pair of boots will only make me feel better temporarily? Those are the ones you want to look at. Those are the ones you want to take a break from or even postpone. If you want to go shopping, and shopping is the thing to make yourself feel better, tell yourself you can go shopping tomorrow. Today you're going to look at why you want to go. I have to soothe myself. It's so important for you to understand that constantly soothing yourself does not benefit your spiritual and conscious evolution. You must be willing to sit once in a while with your discomfort and ask the question, what am I trying to tempt myself with here? What am I trying to hide from myself? So your temptations are yours. They are your idols, and they will fall. We are happy to tell you that your idols will fall, and you will come into alignment with the truth. I am that one that you know as Jesus, and we will speak to you tomorrow. Wow. I love this as well. Only God's plan for salvation will work. The ego's plan for salvation is to distract you, to use smoke and mirrors to make you think that you're getting better, to temporarily put a Band-Aid on a gaping wound. That's not even going to stop the bleeding. It's not even going to stop anything. It's just going to cover things up. And so our answers, we can exercise to distraction. We can buy things to distraction. We smoke, we use alcohol, we eat. We have depression almost as a means of distraction, just because it allows us to not have the motivation to continue to move forward and to really look at what's going on. There are people who really kind of live in that crisis mode. They move from one crisis to another so that they don't have to stop and look at their part in everything. They don't have to stop and look at why they are attracting so many crises to themselves, just because they're putting out too many fires. Allow yourself to see what your temptations are and love yourself anyway. Know that God's plan, the universe, has already forgiven you for any of those temptations. They are not evil. They are just a means of making yourself feel better that will never work in the long run. They work very temporarily, and that's why we keep needing more and more and more of it. I think that covers most of everything today, and I think I have talked long enough. So hope you have a spectacular day, and I will talk to you again later. Bye, guys.